if they were in universities and college. So what they did, the government instituted, like a form that, if you were working for the government, if you were going to school, all of these things, you had to essentially fill a form, and they always have a column for religion. And if you write Baha'i, you can't go there. If you're a student and you write a Baha'i, you're expelled.
Okay. To this day.
To this day.
To this day.
Yes.
Actually, there's a whole thing. It's called Education is Not a Crime. You can look this up on the internet. But there had started an underground, for lack of a better word, an underground source of education, especially with all the technology now, where young Baha'is could get an education if they lived in the country, but that's been cracked down on too.
That's right.
So, and there's a lot of appeal.
Yeah, having read, about the different governments.
Yeah. So it's a challenge.
Yes.
Do you have a meeting place, or do you own a building, or do you just meet in homes, or how does that go?
At this point in this area, we just meet at homes.
Okay.
We do not have
A Baha'i center.
a Baha'i center. Many towns have Baha'i centers,
Yeah.
and there's not really a church. I'm sorry, I've been having a sinus infection, so I hope I don't lose my voice in the middle of this.
Do you want me to get you some water?
That would be great, thank you. We do have several what we call houses of worship, which there's one, the one from the United States is in Wilmette, Illinois, and there's one in Colombia, Australia,
Germany,
India,
Samoa, even some of the
Panama.
islands in Panama, Chile,
thank you. Oh, Chile, not
Yeah.
Colombia, Chile, Africa, I couldn't remember. Uganda, yeah.
But not too many in the States.
There's only one house of worship. That's a really big thing.
Yeah.
Then there are community centers, Baha'i centers.
So areas that there are larger number of Baha'is and more, I would say, affluent and so forth. They they have Baha'i centers. One of the things that the Baha'is are working is actually building communities in where they live, basically. So instead of, just Baha'is going, it is, we are encouraged to, if we do devotions, have it in a local, If you're doing, children's classes, have it for local. So,
and it's not just for us. And that's the other part of it. Yes. That's a big shift in some ways. We're encouraged to have, as Mehry mentioned, devotional gatherings. She has one at her home once a month, and everyone is welcome to it. It's not a Baha'i specific.
Baha'i meeting, anything that Baha'is hold, really is it's open to public. But I think a lot of people are, just hesitant to come to a home,
right?
And so that's the challenge,
But there are prayers from all faiths.
Yes.
There are writings from all faith. If there's a topic, it won't just be Baha'i teachings. Right. It'll be, because the thing is to raise the devotional character of a community, to have people focus on prayer and what can help change their community.
Yeah. It sounds like it's similar in a lot of aspects to the Unitarian Universal Church.
In some respects, except we do have a religious focus. I mean, we do have a founder and a spiritual focus in that way. I mean, specifically, I guess, and that's with Unitarian is more egalitarian.
So the thing that I want to mention is that just oftentimes when we talk about a faith or religion, just there are so many things like this in the world. The Baha'i belief is, what we believe is that Baha'i faith is a divinely ordained religion. It is not just a religion. It is divinely ordained religion. There is a prophet. There are books. There are, holy texts. that the Baha'is have. And, that's really what I just wanted to share with you.
Oh, and that was my question. So is there I'm trying, like a text that would be equivalent to like the Christian Bible? Are there texts that were handed down from the initial
Yes.
founder of the
Yeah.
religion?
Yeah, so we
Quite a
we
few.
call, yeah, the holy text, divine text. Baha'u'llah lived, he was in exile, but for 40 years, he revealed, prayers and, just tablets and things that are, just essentially, comprises the, Baha'i holy text. So there are.
And then his.
So it's not one book. There are,
Right.
just
Then
volumes.
his son, when he passed, then his son was sort of like the.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so are there did his son, are there additional books or whatever that were, so it's not like this was all just from the original teaching, it's like it gets added to? Or?
Well, that's one thing about the Baha'i faith that in some ways we see as different is that there is what's called a written covenant. Baha'u'llah, before he passed, established that his son, Abdul Baha, would be the center of the faith and would be the interpreter of his writings. So not anyone else could come and interpret. And then his will and testament identified his grandson, Shoghi Effendi, which he mentioned his name, as what he called the guardian. So he was an Oxford educated man. He did pretty much all of the translations of the writings of Baha'u'llah. Actually, to this day, when the Universal House of Justice is trying to have things translated, they refer to his writings. How is this word used when Shoghi Effendi translated it? And that's what they use. And it was established at that time that one of his children would then take the position of guardianship. He died without children. So there is no guardianship. There is no person at the head of the Baha'i faith. There's the Universal House of Justice, which is an elected body of 9 members from any Baha'is in the world, and the writings of Baha'u'llah, Abdul Baha, and Shoghi Effendi that sort of stand in the place of that person that would have been there. There is no person.
So the Abdul Baha and Shoghi Effendi, what they did, if the text, if people had questions, just they would say, what is the meaning of this? They would interpret, right? They would then add anything to the text, if there was, so that really, that was their function, Even to this point, our need changes, right? So there are explicit text, and we call it laws that we have in the holy book, but then things change. For instance, euthanasia, for instance, so a lot of different things that current society is dealing with, if it is not in the holy text, because we may not have them. So how do Baha'is, just what is the Baha'i view on those issues? So the Universal House of Justice can, if some of the if there is nothing written in the holy text, they can enact guidance, again based on the writings of the Baha'u'llah, Abdul Baha, and Shoghi Effendi, but that guidance in 100 years might change. In 500 years might change. So then when another we call them, just because Universal House of Justice members are elected for 5 years, so let's say after 5 years, another, group, they may say, okay, we're gonna change this. They can do that. But if it is in a holy text, if anything is written, that cannot change. But anything that is not, that was not there, they can enact, So the guidance comes, so we believe that the institutions of the Baha'i faith, which are, like Universal House of Justice and local and national, assemblies, they are under the guidance, and so, but this would be, how new things, just new guidance would be brought to us, through these institutions of the faith.
What is the initial man? He passed when? 1912?
No, Baha'u'llah passed in, I can never remember.
In
1894, maybe it was the son.
What year did Baha'u'llah pass?
1890.
1892. Baha'u'llah,
Yeah.
thank you.
And then his son, 1912 was sticking.
His son
son
traveled
came-
here, traveled to the United States.
Oh, okay, all right.
At
all
that
right.
time. And he toured the United
So
States.
there was a group of Baha'is in the United States at the time,
Okay.
So they were just, sending him invitations, please come, please come, please come. So, at that time, so again, this is in the history that, just racial inequality was rampant,
Yeah.
And then so he would just would say, I will come when you are united. I will
Yeah.
come when you are united. So he, really, so when he came, he lectured in many synagogues, in many churches, in many universities, in many meetings. And all of those meetings were that, just we need to, just close our eyes to, just the racial differences and look at each other, So there's a story that, he was, I think in his honor, was it? In his honor, I think they canceled, just think of, Iran gave him a dinner, and everything had to be very proper. So every, just person had.
Is that the one in New York at the Waldorf Astoria? Is it
Yeah.
that dinner? It was like this big deal.
Yeah. So, the name tags were placed at, specific places. And so, of course, if you're, more powerful and whatever, you would get the head and this and that. So Abdul Baha, goes, before, people coming. He picks up all of the name tags, okay, and he shoves them, and he changes, and he puts them, randomly, So really, he was, just how, he taught, There is another story, if I have, it's about a group of kids that they were, just walking, and all these kids, and of course there is, there is one black kid in this group of kids, and he wasn't, really in the group, close and so forth. So I'm gonna just go to the end of story, just this group of kids, just they saw this man with this strange garb, and they were laughing, and they were just making fun, So the hostess of this, where Abdul Baha was staying, just told them that he's a very important man, and he invited this group of kids, to come to her house to meet him. Okay, so to their surprise, the kids go. I think they were, the kids go to this person's house, and one by one, as they come in, Abdul Baha hugs them and just like welcomes them. But then when the last kid, which is the black kid, goes, as soon as he opens up the door, he just opens up in a big laughter, and then he says, "Here comes the black rose." And then he just brings chocolate, and then he just doesn't say anything at that time. He doesn't lecture the kids, but he puts this piece of chocolate to the face of this black child, just teaching, just like, chocolate, dark, this. So yeah, so he, really, just emphasized a lot on the, taught the Baha'i community in this country,
Yes, it's
to become more united, because they were not at that time.
no.
Right.
No, and he would. I know there's so with Louis Gregory,
Yes.
prominent African American Baha'i. He, again rearranged the tables, put him next to him. He would do. He wanted to show how you should act.
Well, it's a very progressive religion when you think historically,
Yes.
how old it is.
Mhm.
I mean,
Right.
that's a pretty unusual train of thought for that time in history.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like now it's like, I mean, well, we're still very divided, you know?
Right.
True.
If you think
Unfortunately.
how old that religion is, that's
Mhm.
like very progressive.
He
And
says,
you
yeah,
think
but,
about it,
yeah.
I'm sorry, we recently had just last week, had a 200th anniversary of, there's a precursor to Baha'u'llah. His name is the Bab. It's a title, it means the gate. He was the gateway for Baha'u'llah. And, there was this video that was made. And it brought so many things to my attention because in this video, they just showed Baha'is from around the world talking about their faith. And it's the kind of things you don't think about, but they had this Indian man, and he was talking about the efforts they go through to make sure that they go to different people's houses of different castes for services and for different things, and that this is something that is unusual and that is emphasized by the faith. And these are things that, as an American, you kind of, I mean, you know that there's problems, but you pretty much think that we're all relatively free here, and you don't think that you have that sort of thing, but you think about other parts of the world. I think that's the part that fascinates me most, that there are things that Baha'u'llah tells us as an American I take for granted, but that there are other parts of the world. There was a young woman talking about the equality of men and women, and where did she live? I forget where she lived.
Was it Azerbaijan?
Yeah, it was Azerbaijan, that's right.
Yeah.
And she was talking about that
Part of
education
Russia.
and making sure that the girls get educated.
That fascinates me.
Yeah.
because that,
Yeah.
way back then,
Yeah.
that they were interested, because everything you read about that part of the world, that women are not
Mhm.
considered equal.
Right.
By any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And also, a few other things that just it's good to mention is just backbiting is absolutely just forbidden. Taking care of the needy in the community is highly encouraged. That we really need to be aware of the cry of the needy, and we have to just really just as much as we can
Funding.
help.
Your funding, how does that work?
It comes from us, as I said before. It's just Baha'is give. You give either to your local, you give to your local assembly if you have one, or a nearby local assembly. You give nationally. Now everything's done online, like everything else. You sort of set it up, and you can give online, but to any part of the organization, international, national, you just give directly.
And it's your choice,
Yes.
which part of the organization you want to give to.
Yes, there's a generally for myself, I give to the national fund, and they can use the money at their discretion. Now, if there's a special building fund, say they had a building fund to restore the House of Worship in Wilmette, we may have given something additionally for that. The interesting thing, there's no talk about money in that sense. It fascinates me. For example, we had an assembly here in Monroeville at one time, and the only person who knows what anyone gives to the fund is the treasurer. No one knows. You would know how much you had altogether, but no one looks at the money and who gives, and no one talks about it, because it's up to your conscience. What can you give? Where you're to give sacrificially, as all religions, I think, tell you to give sacrificially. But what sacrificially is unknown to anyone else but you. And God, of course. He knows if you're sacrificing enough. But, and that's one of the things I've always found kind of fascinating, because we're talking about having a fundraiser this coming week, having a dinner. And it's interesting because,
So you guys are welcome to come to this person.
But you don't have to give.
But you would be our guest.
Yes, you would be guests. You would not be allowed to give.
Really?
Yes.
Yes.
Even if it's a fundraiser?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, everybody's allowed to come. But
So there is another, another aspect to, giving, and actually in the Baha'i faith, it's called the right of God. Okay, so that's again, the book of, there is a book of laws, and the laws, of course, the praying and no backbiting and cleanliness
and fasting, we have a fasting period.
And the right of God is another, just thing that the Baha'is do. And essentially, if you, just have an income after, and I'm, making it very simple, you look at, how much did I make in 2018, for instance, how much of, just that money was spent for my necessities, for my, if I'm a business, for whatever I needed, okay? What is the surplus of that? And out of that surplus, 19% of it would be, just given to this fund, and it's called the right of God, okay? Now, this money is used to improve the condition of this, of essentially, society, including people who might be needy, including, elderly,
orphans,
including orphans, including socioeconomic, development programs all over the world, including if, for instance, a Baha'i house of justice, a temple, house of worship is being built in the remotest area of, just the poorest country. Where does that money comes from? It comes, partly from these type of funds, that are at the disposal, of the, just Baha'i, in the center of the Baha'i faith and so forth. So it's called the right of God. We do have that.
So is a certain, because you're so locally, about the community, and I get that like a certain amount of that is sent off, but how do you support your local community then?
Yeah, it's the same as Susan said that, so we have, there is a local Baha'i fund, okay? So right now here, because in Monroeville, just there are just,
our families.
Yeah. So we don't have an,
A fund,
an
actually.
assembly, basically. So for instance, whatever we do, it's either Susan pays or I pay.
That makes it easy.
Right now.
That's about it.
But Pittsburgh has an assembly. So then, when contributions are made to the Baha'is of Pittsburgh. So then the treasurer, and Bob, you would, just, appreciate this because he's the treasurer of the MEM, okay? So the treasurer, just keeps track of the money coming and going, and then the expenses and so forth. And so that's how, and so the contributions goes there. So right now, it's just us.
and very often it's like that. I mean, I'm sure at your own churches and everything, when we had children's classes and that sort of thing, teachers buy supplies, teachers, you just, it's your in-kind contribution, you just make sure things are done.
I believe you said at one point you need 9 people to have an assembly.
9 adults.
Would you share why 9? What's significant about that?
Well,
9?
I mean, this is, what Baha'u'llah said in the, the Book of Laws, that, in every city, when there is 9, adults live, you can form a local spiritual assembly. Okay. Now, if there is more than 9, then you elect, so people elect from this, but if there's only 9, so these 9, just they, if everybody agrees, we form, the assembly. Yeah, go ahead.
9 is also, sorry, go ahead, Mahmoud, sorry.
9 also, if all members are not there, and they have to decide, at least 5 is there, plus 1, so they can have majority vote there, or, makes it easier to pass the laws, I mean, whatever affairs they have. But Baha, short for Baha'u'llah, in numerical number becomes 9. So you choose that number. Yes. And one more thing to add, all these 9 members, no matter whether it's local, national, they have, like you and I have, their own jobs, they go morning to work, they come back. Nobody's on payroll or anything.
Right.
Everybody has jobs, But as the law
That's
for the
because
faith
of,
is
they
to
can't
serve,
work
who
there,
can serve
because they have
best
so
to
much
you?
responsibility,
So every 2 weeks, every month, they come together, what are the needs of the community and how to serve it. And it is once a year. Every year, the election is there.
Yes.
Except for House of Justice, which at present is
5
every
years.
5 years. Every year, this member changes.
Are there holidays or?
Yes, there are
That's good,
holidays.
good question.
We just had last week 2 of them, holy days. And it was the birthdays of the Bab, who is the gate, the forerunner of Baha'u'llah, and Baha'u'llah's birthday. Coming up in November, we have a holy day called the Day of the Covenant. I mentioned that Baha'u'llah gave us a written document of who should be in charge of what with his faith, and that day is observed on the 26th of November.
9 holy days.
9 holy days.
Well, there
Some
are
of
more
them-
than 9 actually, but
9
9 work needs to be suspended.
If you
So,
can, if
yeah,
you
can.
cannot work or go to school, you should not work or go to
Yeah.
school on those 9 days.
Yeah.
We have, as far as a holiday sort of a thing, we have something that's called a Yamiha. It's the intercalary days, the intercalary days, intercalary days. The Bab started a new calendar. All religions, there's a new calendar. And he has a calendar, 19 months of 19 days each, which leaves us 4 to 5 days at the end of the year, which is at the end of February. And at the end of that month, so during that time, those 4 to 5 days, there may be gift giving. It's supposed to be for charity, hospitality, and for gift giving. So, you do a lot of visiting, and you get together, and you'll do things like we'll get together and bake cookies and stuff and give to neighbors and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
I'll bring you some.
We'll do it this year for sure. Actually, I was looking at little pans for little cakes, but anyway, Macra, we'll talk about that.
Mary's very nice about baking for us.
Yes, you can always count on her for
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But then immediately following that, on March 1st or 2nd, depending on how the days go, we start our fasting period. So all adults, all Baha'is between the ages of 15 and 70 do not eat between sunrise and sunset for 19 days.
19 days?
For 19
1
days.
month.
For
That's
one
19.
Baha'i month.
Baha'i month is 19
So
days.
no food or water from sunrise to sunset.
Wow.
Now, if you're elderly, which elderly is, like senior, it's good, in the Baha'i faith, you're Safaenian older.
And of course, if you work
you're
hard,
pregnant, if
yes.
you are,
Do hard labor.
right,
You
hard
know,
labor,
you-
and
you
if
know.
you're breastfeeding, if
know.
you're sick, so
Yes.
it's not, binding.
if you travel, there's
Yes.
exceptions.
That's very interesting because we just did a series on fasting.
Oh, okay.
And actually, I always, I used to think, just fasting, because I didn't know any better, just right now science is actually proving the importance and the benefits of fasting, so, it is, now I fast. I have no problem doing it because it is, just we're learning more and more about the benefits.
I'm glad for the daylight savings time.
Well, that moved on us a couple of years ago. It started earlier. It got kind of bugged me there when that happened. They moved it up.
So you don't have to stir the pot with this question, but where do they stand with all the LGBTQ, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That sounds like some new laws.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well,
New discussion maybe.
Mhm, mhm.
So it is, a touchy,
Yeah.
very touchy, basically. So there are a few things that, just it makes me feel very comfortable, Number one, whatever is the person is between that person and God.
Yeah.
Okay. Number two, no gossiping, no chattering, no this and that, okay? Number three, the third one, went out of my mind, but, but essentially, just like being chaste, living a, chaste and holy life is very important. So, what are the causes of those things? We don't know. There is debate even now. These are all issues. Social has, they have become social and political issues, right now. But, regardless of what you are, it should not, because in the Baha'i faith, just like extramarital relationship is not, even if you're heterosexual, is not acceptable. So if you're homosexual even, it's not acceptable. So, living together and this and that, is not, So these are some of the things, The Baha'i view still is, this condition, what do you want to say? I can't, I can't get it out of my, just.
I don't know. It's
Yeah, but it is. I don't want to say that Baha'is believe that it's the disease. It is not. We don't believe that.
But
We don't
there's no
also
judgment of it. I mean, there's no sense that you would never hear a Baha'i or the Baha'i community say that that's wrong or you're wrong and there's something wrong with you. It just isn't.
Yeah.
It isn't that way. There are laws in the Baha'i faith that if you're a member of the Baha'i faith, you have to follow.
Right.
If you're not, I mean, that's not. It's just sort of not the way the faith is about anything. We don't gamble and we don't drink, but we don't go out and say you're wrong because you do. And it's not
Yeah.
that kind
Well, that's why I
of.
was curious,
So it is
because
not
it
an
does seem
accept.
like
It is not, just again, I may say it this way because of my lack of understanding of it, fully, but it is not acceptable the way that we are doing it right now. As I said, it is so mixed up. But if there is a tendency, this is from the guardian of the faith, Shoghi Effendi, it cannot, we cannot allow it to manifest itself in overt, just relation. I'm just just two gay people like any other persons, like a non-gay people. They cannot live if they are not married. So if you're gay, even if you think that this is in me and this is my condition, still cannot allow this to manifest itself in a relationship that is Now, if people say that, well, gay marriage is acceptable, how about that? I can't, answer that because I really we don't, I don't know what to say. Mahmoud, did you want to say
Yeah,
something?
I just want to say, but we have to look at the person as a spiritual being.
Yes.
We have to look at the person as a spiritual being. I'm not the one who is going to judge. Because
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was going to
whatever
say.
he professes, he's going to judge it.
Mhm.
Lord Jesus Christ said,
Yeah.
He said, somebody else is going to judge.
Yeah. No.
So, but we have to look at him as a spiritual being.
Yeah.
And there is no measure. I may be
Right.
hetero, I may be showing all kinds of, going to the holy places and all that, but in my
Inside,
heart,
yeah.
not act really as a true human being,
Mhm.
as what I'm created for. So we have to look at the person as a spiritual being.
Yeah.
And as long as, I don't know, as I said, these things are new.
Yeah.
These things are developing.
Yes.
And as Mehry said, 100 years from now, 50 years from now, we may have more clear answer
Yeah.
as a society.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks.
As you look at it, all of you can remember, maybe 50 years ago, this thing was not even
No, we didn't even.
An
talk about
issue,
it.
right?
We
Yeah.
never talked about it.
But now everybody is
Yeah.
talking about
Yeah.
it. So things are organic, changing.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I was going to say
Yeah.
that just the issue is, how do
Evolution.
we react, and what does the person who is does. So that part is God, and that person then as a community, as other people, it's non-judgmental. It's none of our business, basically.
Yeah.
And so
That's-
be accepting and looking at, and just see what happens. So it's tough, yeah.
No, I was just curious, because it does seem generally to be a very non-judgmental
Mhm.
religion.
Yeah.
That's why I was just kind of
Yeah.
curious, like, if there was any,
Well, and it's one of the things we talked about, the backbiting, and I think of the things I've learned over the years with the Baha'i faith, and is that's an issue. And we don't have a gradation. We have laws, okay? We don't talk about sin or not sin or that sort of thing, but we have laws. We have ways we're supposed to live our lives. And the thing that I have seen repeated over and over again in different holy things is this whole issue of backbiting and not talking about other people. And it dawns on me that that's really about unity. Because if you are talking about someone else, it's hard to be unified, because then you're going to be in your little group and this person's going to be in that little group. And, the thing is, none of us, as Mahmoud was saying, knows what's inside somebody's house. Someone can put a front up that's amazing, right? We've seen it in our lives.
Oh, yeah.
They go to all the holy things in the world, but inside their heart, it's not there.
Yeah.
So, it's people's business is their own, and unless someone's doing something that harms
Someone else.
the faith themselves, it's just not your concern what, someone else is doing.
The other thing in that regard, Abdul Baha, who is the exemplar of the Baha'i faith, said, if in a person there is 9 bad quality and 1 good quality, close your eyes on those 9 and magnify that 1 good quality. Because what happens? If we talk about bad quality of the person, the gap between us increases and gets us further away from each other. But whereas the goal of the Baha'i faith revolves around wanting unity of humankind as a sister and brothers. So we have to come closer together rather than getting away from each other.
Thank you, Mahmoud.
We have
Thank
time for a few more questions if anybody has some others.
Who, marries you? Do you have
Ah,
did you go to your little
interesting.
group and?
We have, actually, in the state of Pennsylvania, there is something that's called a Quaker marriage license. And I don't know if you ever heard of that. It's you marry each other. You don't have to have a clergy. A Baha'i ceremony consists of 1 line. It says, "Verily we will all abide by the will of God." Now, if you think about that for a second, that sort of encompasses richer, poor, sickness, health, it encompasses all of that, right? Well, verily, we will abide by the will of God. We will all verily abide by the will of God. You say it to one another, before witnesses, if there's two witnesses. That's it.
Yeah.
And then it's signed, and you get, of course, you follow state laws, and you get the state marriage license. Beside that, it can be anything else you want it to be. You know, long white dresses, lots of music, songs, whatever you would like other than that. But it's that line that makes you married.
So,
And you have to
but
be.
doesn't it that the assembly, just has to, I don't want to say see these.
Well, here's the part that makes that
yeah.
important.
She got married here.
in Pittsburgh. Another interesting thing about Baha'i marriage is that no matter how old you are, you have to have the permission of your parents to marry.
Consent.
If your consent of your parents to marry. And it's a spiritual obligation for that parent to ensure that this is a good union. So if you think about it, it sounds like a little weird, especially as Americans. But if you think about it, if your mother and your father say it's okay and they like that person and they think that person is a good match for you, they're going to also be supportive of that marriage and that union and keeping you together. So I'll tell you a story. My husband, who was married previously, his parents had divorced and he did not know his father. When he wanted to get married the first time, he had to find his father. He had to find, they just weren't in touch. It wasn't like he was hiding or anything, but you know how divorces can be. And he found out he went to the Baha'i National Assembly. They knew some people, like where he had lived, and they got in touch with some people, and because of that, he met his father. And we had a wonderful relationship with his father until he died a couple of years ago, and he got to know his grandson, and we had, so there's a lot of wisdom in that law. There are lots of stories that I've heard from people about that law. But so you do have to tell the assembly, you have to have permission. I laugh. My mother, who was an elementary school principal, wrote a memo to, from. I just kind of shook my head. It was like, yep, that's my mom. But, you have to have permission from the parents.
Another thing which is encouraging Baha'i faith as far as marriage is concerned, inter-race and inter-religion. So, my son-in-law is a Norwegian, he's a Christian, married my daughter who is a Baha'i. So, it is encouraged, inter-religion and inter-race.
That's interesting. So what happens if one of the parents says no go?
You don't marry. You don't. If you follow the laws, you don't. I have an interesting story. There's a couple of people that I've known. He's white, she's African American, and they were in college. They're in their late 60s, early 70s now. The Nysons. I don't know if you know Vicky and Joel Nyson, talking about Mahmoud and those guys. But they wanted to marry. And his parents, I think, said no. And he was going to medical school and she was going on to graduate school or something like that. So they said, no, we don't give permission, because they didn't want the interracial marriage. That's what they didn't want. And they said, okay. And he went off to school and she went off to school, but they continued to be in love with each other, but by following their parents' guidance and showing their parents, because the parents thought, well, they'll be away from each other, and being patient in the guidance of their parents and going back to their parents and showing their parents that they would abide by these laws and that's what they believed. They eventually gave them permission to marry.
Wow.
So, and you hear lots of little stories like that. I also have a friend who denied her daughter permission to marry, and her daughter's grateful to this day that her mother did not let her marry the man she wanted to marry. It would not have worked, and the mother felt that it was her spiritual obligation to be sure. And my friend will say that what she heard from her daughter was about a wedding, not about a marriage.
Yeah.
And that's what she heard. That's what she kept hearing.
Yeah.
She didn't hear anything about a marriage. She kept hearing about this wedding. And, it wasn't easy. I won't say it was easy, but the daughter was ultimately grateful.
So go ahead.
So you said there's a community in Pittsburgh. Are there other ones in Allegheny County?
Well, there are groups of Baha'is that live in, like our little community here. I know like in Sewickley they have about, I don't know how many, 6 or 7 Baha'is that live up there, South Hills. But we're all part of what's called the Pittsburgh Cluster, which basically includes the Baha'is in Allegheny County, Fayette, Washington, and Westmoreland County. If there are any Baha'is in those areas, we sort of work together.
You get
as a
together
community. Yes, we do.
and work on projects together?
And that's exactly what we do.
Yeah.
Every quarter we get together. We have what's called a cluster reflection meeting is what we call it. But we get all of those people together, talk about what we're doing in our communities. Right now we're focusing on these devotional gatherings that Mehry mentioned, just getting together with neighbors and friends and that sort of thing to say prayers. And we talk about what we do and how that's going and things like that. Mm-hmm.
Any teachings or beliefs about an afterlife?
Yes, we do. A part of marriage. If you have a true union with your spouse, it goes on through all the worlds of God. My husband used to joke with me about that all the time. He'd say some really bad joke or something. He'd go, all the worlds of God, baby, all the worlds of God. I just sort of sit there and think, oh my goodness, what have I done? But
Say I do. Back to the parents.
But we believe there is an afterlife. We believe that there are worlds of God, that this is not the end, that you maintain your basic essence and consciousness and who you are, but, and I'm never good at talking about this sort of thing, but what you do in this life is to prepare you for the next life and for all the worlds of God. So you don't end, you don't stop here. And you don't sort of go on to do nothing. You continue through these different worlds. And it's the analogy, there's a lot of analogies. It's like this, like the baby prepares in the womb, his eyes and his ears and all those things for this world, we should be preparing spiritually in this world for the next. So.
How did you two connect?
The Baha'i faith. The literal.
Well, but I mean, how, like, if
literally
so somebody moves into
I will tell you. It's a funny story because the same lady is the reason I married my husband. I was moving here. I lived in New Jersey. I was going to work for the Valley News Dispatch in Tarentum. And I called the Pittsburgh Assembly to say I was moving. Where should I live? Blah, 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 blah. And they said, well, there's this family in Monroeville, and there's, Mehry, this was in 1987. 88, somewhere like that. Yes, I've known you a long time now. Right. And I didn't first come here. All the worlds of God. You and me, Mehry. And that's how I came here to Monroeville.
So they help to connect families. Like,
yes.
So if somebody was moving to Pittsburgh, they would contact.
Mm-hmm.
They would let you know if there were other families that.
Yes,
this
exactly. Exactly.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So going back to your question, life after death. So the Baha'i belief is that, okay, just we are composed, just our true self is our soul,
Mm-hmm.
And so soul is a, I don't want to say entity, but has come from God, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And it continues.
Mm-hmm.
It is, and so the when we come to this world is, just we come to this world, we live, and then when we die, which the soul and the body separate. So body goes back to where it came from, that's the earth, and then the soul continues its journey towards where it came from, which is the worlds of God. So then, just souls, just the journey of soul continues in the after, in the other worlds of God and so forth. And then the worlds of God are not separate, they are not here and there. These are all, just, we are co-mingled. We are, just, it's all here. It's just like, as Susan said, the womb, just the baby was in the womb, was in this world, but didn't know it was, here.
Right.
But then when it was born, now, so the soul is the same thing, because the word of God, just they are higher. And right now we don't have the capacity, but the soul, just when it's freeze, it gets freed from this cage, which our body, then the birth continues.
And continues, by the way. It doesn't stop. There is no limit. It continues until it reaches its owner, God.
Yeah, we even pray for.
Similar to Christianity.
Yeah.
And we even pray for people after they've passed away, for the progress of their souls. We continue to pray for them.
Yeah, I do this. I think in Christianity we do the same.
Yeah.
And the
But there's
soul,
no incarnation
soul
or
of
anything
those
like that. They just know
loved one who passed
you come to this
the
world,
next
you live.
always influences our life here.
Yeah.
So whenever you want to press some button, do it. There is
I-
an answer.
I will tell you a very concrete story about that just happened to us. Our son was going through some difficulty, and I was in the car with my husband. We're coming back from the grocery store, and I don't look at Facebook all the time, I looked at Facebook, and I see this message from him that he was in pain and suffering. He had just posted it a minute before. I don't know what made me do that. His grandmother, his grandparents. Someone told me, look at Facebook, and there was his message right there, 1 minute before. And I could go days without looking at Facebook, but sometimes I think I forget. I don't know about everybody, but sometimes I forget that there's that connection. And you get a concrete.
It's a God thing.
Yeah. I think he's too busy to be worried about individually sometimes, but I guess not.
And I don't know if Mahmoud mentioned or not, so, just as the soul progresses, so we can, just like those who are living, can assist with that. Of course, the progress of the soul depends on, it's on the grace of God, but then the charity in the name of the deceased and prayers for the deceased, would help. Service
that you do.
And charity, and in the name, so it helps.
Tree, in his honor, or anything, any service rendered. Will help in the name of that person, it will benefit the soul.
I think we've got time for one more question, if anybody has one. Sure.
Just coming back to the question of marriage and also LGBT, I don't think anyone has asked how would Baha'is see same-sex marriage if two people with the same sex or gender had the permission of their parents and wanted to get married? Would that be recognized?
At this time, it is not. Now, if that, again, the Universal House of Justice has the authority, if it's asked of them to look at what the Baha'i teachings might say and make a decision to that. At this time, it is not. Now, Baha'is have no I don't want to say that we, as a faith, have no problem with that as a law or as anything, because those are laws and that's fine. We're not judging, as we said before, or that sort of thing. But for now, in Baha'i marriage, that would not be allowed.
All right, well, I want to thank both of our panelists for coming out this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
A couple quick announcements. We will be back next month on the first Thursday of the month. That's December. How did that happen? December 5th. Parallel Patel will be here to talk about the Hindu Jain religion. And we also would love for everyone to take one of these flyers on your way out. It is primarily to invite everyone to the Monroeville Interfaith Ministerium's Community Thanksgiving Table, which is happening Monday, November 25th It's for the whole family, 7 o'clock at Temple David. So there's information about that on the flyers up here and some other upcoming events on the back. So please be sure to stop by and pick one up. And thank you everyone for coming out
Do we not
tonight.
have a panel on the 21st?
Oh, yes, I am so sorry. Thank you very much. We do have a panel on November 21st.
I don't have that on there.
That's,
Oh, it's
I think 2 weeks from tonight.
Correct.
It's a Thursday. It will be an interfaith panel, so there will be multiple representatives, and I believe the topic is mental health.
Right, and possibly suicide and bullying.
Do we have a representative talking about?
So be sure to
We
come back
haven't
for that as well
talked
too. There
about
should
it.
be flyers for that as well outside, so. Thank you everyone so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sure.
Thanks, everybody.
Actually, Brittany, this was